"Stand down, Commander, that's an order." Colonel Salva roared through Commander Nia's broken earpiece. His voice was a sharp, shrilly and agitated ball that thumped against Nia's eardrums hard. She didn't say a thing, she waited unwaveringly, afforded a brisk risky pause and considered all her possible responses. None of them would be plausible, at least not in the round head of a hard-ass, 5-star, super superior officer, half a dozen levels superior. So without giving it much thought she chose the harder way out, mute herself away. This wasn't the typical junior officer behavior in the Galactic Federation, but there's always a first. Besides, her AI interface which boosted her neural function by over 1,000% ran an algorithm and gave her a prediction in real time. There was nothing to say. "You are disobeying a direct order from a senior officer, Commander. You understand the ramifications?" Salva came again, this time louder, urgent and on edge. Damn, was he closer to the comm unit? She treated him another wave of stale silence. She knew he'd fume, froth and throw some more threats onto the already growing pile. "This is mutiny, Commander, lèse majesty, reckless, threats like those." She thought to herself amusedly, simulating the look-alike of a response she'd never give, then twitched her mouth to wipe away the wry smirk that was starting to build on her luscious lips. Officer Profile Log. Year 5142 AD, Nia Sia, Commander in the Sagittarius sect of the Cosmic Battalion, the defense arm of the Galactic Federation, serial No. 9182-73645-IXV, First Officer of the USS Palmer III, a heavy armor destroyer. Having received the latest system update, Palmer III was by far the most formidable spaceship in the entire Federation. It wasn't just faster than anything sublight in the galaxy, it was the swiftest, most loaded and had a cloak mechanism. Its avionics and the payload module were off the charts. Nia wouldn't have been prouder to be the second in command on a bird so divine, until the weight of the galaxy sifted through the ranks and landed smack dab on her shoulders. That was a couple of light days back. The human race had maneuvered through the stormy millennia, survived self-destruction through hellish nuclear wars, narrowly escaped with the Earth intact through an asteroid maelstrom thrust Earth's way by their cosmic guardian angel, Jupiter, and lived through a few hundred potential extinction-level events over the centuries to the 52nd century. They were now a Type 3 civilization on the Kardashev scale, and had set up shop all over the Milky Way. The Sagittarius sect was actually located somewhere in the spiral Carina Sagittarius arm of the Milky Way. The Cosmic Battalion had sentinels based all over the galaxy, the Cygnus Orion platoon being the mightiest since it was closest to home. Earth was now a fortress, with geospatial satellites interconnected to form a laser web that shielded Earth from threats like stray comets, space junk and cloaked enemy vessels. Population had leveled down to about 5 billion, with about 8 times that number out there among the stars. The virus of life had actually infested the galaxy, space shuttles were in business between colonies, and business was burning. Nia had worked her way up the ranks, from an amateur cadet in Federation school back in Hawaii Cosmopolitan to space camps on Mars to a junior officer aboard several space stations around the solar system. Base Io was actually the most enthralling and adventurous. It was also where she met Captain Walter, the man who was literally the answer to her prayers. Their voyage had led her here, a step closer to the center of the barred galaxy. She had worked side by side with him, grown fond of him by the day and cherished every little moment they shared aboard Palmer III. Captain Walter was actually the reason she was committing high treason. About 5 light days back, Palmer III had been on patrol towards the outer edge of the Carina constellation. Telemetry sensors read normal, a boring day aboard the humongous patrol ship. The crew was having dinner, only essential personnel hung back on the bridge. The serene, orange glow of painted the stellar horizon. "Permission to enter thy sacred quarters, Captain." Nia had intoned melodiously from the doorway to the ready room. "No, you may not test my patience, O Ancient One." The captain's heavy timbre echoed from behind a shelf. Smiling cordially, she welcomed herself to a cushy settee. Being best of friends, they could afford the informality. It was almost mystical really, like Ian had found Yang among the stars. The captain, big, burly, rugged and authoritative, came out holding an expensive bottle of champagne, sparkling in the natural light sifting through the windows. Radiation shields had been modified to allow in a portion of visible light in the spectrum. Now the crew could have a minute to sunbathe and bask. "Care to drink on the job, number one?" He loved calling her that, it suited her. "Why else would I be here?" she had said jovially, returning the affectionate gaze. He had shared a toast with her, his glass clinking slightly against hers in some good old-fashioned cheers. In some solar days they actually didn't have a minute to spare, which was ridiculous considering there was all the time in space. However, things like physically inspecting all the 8 decks, taking reports from commanders from each wing and presenting them to the captain were tedious for Nia. For the captain, addressing all the issues in the reports were exhausting to the bone. He also checked in regularly with base command and handled impromptu problems with drive engines, artificial gravity simulators and life support. It was a full-time job, so a treasured moment like this one never lasted. On that note, the whole ship suddenly went on red alert, alarms going haywire while sirens flickered through the dimly lit hallways. A sonorous treble boomed through every room, urging all personnel to man their battle stations. Nia glanced at Walter, then resignedly rose, placing her half-full champagne glass onto a pixelated virtual table. Walter grabbed his silver captain's emblem and pattered heavily after her. They stepped out of a next-level intelligent elevator to find a full bridge. Junior officers were called to attention as the mighty captain soldiered majestically towards his throne. After the retina scan, the DNA identification and the fingerprint scan at the side of his seat, the red lasers around the seat vanished, granting him access. "I appreciate the response time from everyone, Commander Hitler," report. He spoke calmly like it was just another Tuesday evening in the office. Hitler, the science officer, already had a diagnosis of their situation. Sensors are detecting a massive EM field disturbance which is flashing in and out of sensor range. Hitler spoke science. "That's a commendable observation, science officer. You want to maybe explain why my ship is on red alert?" "Yeah, Captain Walter always did that." Hitler lived up to his scientific prowess. He spoke a lot of future science which the captain told him to explain since he had forgotten to bring his Hitler dictionary. The disturbance didn't only blink in and out of radar, which by the way kept confusing our long-range sensors. Every time it registered on the sensors it had gotten closer. "Judging by its size and trajectory, I have an algorithm telling me we are right in the middle of its path," Hitler expounded elaborately. "Zulu, full reverse impulse engines and halt, shields up, full power. And ready the FTL drive just in case we need to jump." He spoke to literally everyone aboard the ship. Zulu was the helmsman, short, pretty, deft and the most experienced navigation officer in this part of the galaxy. She had drafted a stellar map of the spiral Sagittarius arm with some heaven-touched accuracy. A number of platoons in the Palmer series had eyes on her. Palmer 3 was lucky to have her. "When was the last signature?" Walter queried. Space was not a good place for surprises, because everything you encounter usually tries to kill you. They were over 8 light days away from base and the nearest Federation vessel was a few double figures light hours away. It wasn't a good time. "About 4 minutes, now, it's back and it is, here." Hitler's voice trailed as he looked up worriedly. Suddenly, the massive ship shuddered vigorously before balancing. The orange tinge outside the wide windows was overshadowed by something baleful, like a huge bird looming over their heads, its wings spread out. It beat Palmer 3 in size by over 18 times, and the way it slithered unnoticeably in space gave everyone creeps. "What the heck is that sitting on my ship?" Captain Walter was on edge. No one had any answers, not even the veteran master astrophysicist on the bridge. "Captain, I can't tell anything more than it gives a powerful electromagnetic field." That was Hitler, shrugging resignedly. "Captain, they are scanning us." Alida, the comms master reported, her breath sharp. The captain rose, his huge figure overshadowing everyone else around. "Give me something." The bridge was on fire, ignited by an enemy vessel no one could see, and fanned by the captain. They had had a dozen alien encounters on their journey through the universe. So far the Federation had discovered about 18 alien species, some horrendous, some hideous, some beyond description. None of them had had technology this advanced. Most were just a Type 1 civilization, a few Type 2, the humans were actually more advanced. This encounter right here, if it turned out to be an alien encounter, was by far the most threatening. "I can confirm the presence of an energy field encasing us, Captain," Nia had said. She had been a science officer before becoming a first officer. So she was just letting everyone know she could still read the instruments right. "Besides that, we cannot read anything else, it's like the blank shadow of Jupiter in the eye of an X-ray ocular lens." She added. "We can't send a SOS, too much interference," Alida reported. Walter gave it a thought, then looked up and spoke loudly through the ship-wide comm channel. "Attention all crew members. We may have encountered a potentially hostile enemy vessel. So strap in and brace for an emergency jump. Black alert." He intoned urgently. He then sat back into his magnificent chair and activated his laser belt. The ship transformed from a red to gray glow. "Engineering, how is the FTL drive coming?" he asked through the comm link. "Captain, this is engineering, FTL drive is good for go." A deep voice came through from the west wing. "Good, Zulu, are we ready to jump?" He redirected his muzzle to navigation. "Aye Captain, USS Palmer 3 jumping in pend, Sarah, tra, do." The ship suddenly shook, creaking as a tremor whooshed through it. A deafening silence befell the place, shortly before everything went black and blank. Faint yellow emergency lights twinkled intermittently as alarms set the whole place on a frenzy. Multiple decks reported system failure and critical system overload. The onboard computer had shut down power to all the main decks to avoid a short circuit. It took a minute to reboot. Almost everything was malfunctioning. The superior enemy vessel was gone and they hadn't moved an inch. Has anyone seen the captain?" Zulu brought the observation to everybody's attention. Sure enough, darting eyes all over the bridge, Nia couldn't see the captain. She tried reaching him through his comm link, it went unanswered. She ordered a ship-wide scan, there was no sign of him. "Okay, let's do a complete system check while we look for the captain." Nia took charge, now that she was the acting captain. They did, the reports were all similar, nothing was working. They were simply another space junk floating around in the dead zone. However, Hitler came with a very eerie report. "We may not have moved an inch, but we definitely moved. The chronometer says it has been about 8 hours since our attempted jump to FTL." He said. That was weird, because it had been only a couple of minutes. Either the chronometer, all chronometers on the ship were broken, or they had just traveled through time. After an hour of thorough repair, they managed to get their beacon working. A Federation vessel had arrived about 4 hours later, and the colonel of the Sagittarius sect was among the entourage on the convoy. He also brought forensic experts with him to assess the situation. They did more or less what Nia's officers had done and reported with a few more details. Apparently the enemy vessel had Palmer 3 held in place with A. And its attempted jump led to a system overload which in turn triggered emergency shutdown. A transporter window was witnessed just seconds after the attempt, and that was probably how the captain had been abducted. The colonel was gracious enough to let Nia in on classified intelligence. He said the Federation had been aware of a suspected Type 5 civilization located somewhere in an region about 3 light days from Palmer 3's current location. Details of their existence were fuzzy, but from a rough sketch, they were on a Class M planet located inside a grid intersection of the fabric of spacetime, an area where spacetime portals were easily possible to create. Well, that was very enlightening. All due respect, Colonel, but a heads up would have been appreciated. You knew of the existence of a possibly hostile species and didn't warn us when we set out to patrol the region. Nia flared up. I'd apologize for that, but it wouldn't make a difference. What we need to do now is damage control. We will fall back to base and convene with the High Council to see the way forward. You will remain acting captain for the meantime," said the colonel. "What about Captain Walter? We should all be out there looking for him." "I appreciate your concern, Commander, what I don't appreciate is your tone. I need you to keep it together and be a soldier. It would be reckless to throw Federation resources into a wild goose chase without any clear plan, possibly start a galactic war with a superior enemy. Do you understand, Commander?" The colonel's tempo had been rising steadily, ending in a loud, commanding bawl. Yeah, she did. She understood. She understood that the Federation was willing to sacrifice a long-serving captain, her mentor, for fear of a war. She'd been trained to not leave any soldier behind, the colonel might be too old to remember. So she had waited till everything had cooled down, then slid out of Palmer 3 with an FTL-capable shuttlecraft, the size of a small jet. That's how she'd reached there. And set out looking for this hidden planet. She'd lost contact with the threatening colonel soon as she entered the cloud. She'd had time to contemplate on her foolhardy decision though, maybe the colonel was right. Maybe she should turn back. The more she thought of it, the faster she steered her bird. She was going to save the captain. She wasn't afraid of danger, she was afraid of losing him. By some kind of ethereal alignment of events, she picked on the captain's location beacon a couple of light hours into the cloud. She set sail for the place, wonder and awe getting the better of her. This was literally a whole new universe. She wondered how they had no knowledge of it. Slowing down from a distance, she sent a pulse of radio waves at the empty space where the captain supposedly was. There was definitely an Earth-sized object, cloaked completely. Well, they were Type V alright, cloaking a whole planet was still way beyond the human capability. She switched into the mode and descended into the planet. It was all covered in ocean when she entered, but she easily made the calculations and dove into the liquid, whatever it was. Below the ocean, a whole new world opened up, with alien designs and architecture taking a toll on her eyes. From down there the sky looked normal, blue. You wouldn't suspect there was a whole hydrosphere suspended up there. Well, she'd found Walter, trying to escape as she had expected. The reunion was brief. "Where's everyone?" she had asked after a tight embrace. There was no one around. "No idea, just woke up here with lots of machines scanning me," Walter replied. Great, it was an AI world. That was a theory suggested in the early 21st century, that a civilization can reach a singularity where machines become the primary species. In this world, they were the only species. Well, that was a good adventure, but they had to get out of here. "Is that an ocean up there?" Walter asked curiously. "I should be asking you that. Strap in, we gotta go." "Man, this was unbelievably easy," she said jovially, then ignited the engines. Maybe these guys weren't as intelligent as they thought. The little bird shot up on a faster-than-light mode. The next thing they knew, they had hit the top of and they were falling. The shuttlecraft was damaged, the captain was unconscious and red alarms were blinking. Mia kept on drifting in and out of consciousness. From her upside-down position, her bleary eyes espied something on the chronometer. The year was 2019, and they were adrift in Earth's orbit. She cursed softly as she effortlessly let go of her consciousness. It turned darker and darker by the tick of the clock, the 2019 clock. Mechanical whirring reverberated throughout the house, drowning out upbeat Christmas music playing from a boombox atop the refrigerator. "Oh, what fun it is to ride," the short, muscular brunette sang into her spatula. Sarah Phillips pushed her mixer to its limit during the next verse of the song. Splashes of yellow batter adorned the walls of the bright kitchen. Thankfully, the floral granny apron she wore protected the bouncing skirts of her 1950s-inspired red, swing-style Christmas dress. "Watcha think, Scruffy Fluff?" she cooed at an aging party-colored cocker spaniel perched at her feet. "Think my co-workers will like my lemon squares for the cookie exchange tonight?" Hazel eyes begged for treats through thick, graying eyebrows. To christen the new house, Sarah invited her co-workers over for a Christmas cookie exchange. Now for the secret ingredient. She emptied the contents of a small, white bottle into the cream cheese icing. That should do it. Now to just wait until everything is chilled. Arms akimbo, she surveyed the kitchen. But first the dishes. She sighed. As she worked, Sarah watched the sun set through the large bay windows, even though it was only 6 p.m. Soon guests would arrive, and Sarah hurried to finish cleaning the house. Ding dong. Ding dong. Phew, just in time. The swing dress billowed as Sarah spun around to answer the door, making her feel like a fairy princess. "Good evening, sir. Thank you for coming." Sarah cheerily greeted an older man in his 60s. "Hey Sarah. Thanks for inviting me. It's good to see you finally focus on your work and get into a house. And please feel free to call me John. We're not in the office." His bushy salt and pepper beard framed a smile, and his height made for an imposing figure in the doorway. "Yes, sir. John." He handed her an apple pie his wife had made. Sarah found it difficult to be so casual with her boss, even during her off time. "Oh, here comes Emily." Sarah opened the door wider to admit her boss as a heavy-set, red-haired woman came bounding up the front steps behind him. Her curly bob bounced with the motion, and her breath created clouds in the winter air. "Let me in. It's freezing out here." "Emily, where is your coat? I doubt that a flannel shirt and jeans are enough for this weather," Sarah said, letting Emily sack her inside. It's not that far of a walk, so I thought I could do without. Besides, you'll let me borrow a coat for the way back, right? Emily asked. Sure. Sarah replied. Oh, and Emily. Did you bring anything? Nah. I figured everyone else would bring enough. The redhead replied through a mouthful of lemon bar. I was really hoping to wait until everyone else arrived. Sarah whimpered. Hey, no worries. I know how to help myself. The office secretary said, taking another bite of lemon bar. Sarah sighed. The doorbell rang again. Please, help yourselves to refreshments. I have drinks set out in the kitchen. Sarah announced before turning to answer the door. 3 more guests arrived. An older woman named Dr. Moira Simmons, a skinny man in his 30s named Dr. Jack Lawrence, and a young intern named Claire Hingle. I see your taste in style hasn't changed. Jack remarked. He removed his coat, and folded it in his arms. There's a coat rack right there if you would like to hang it up, Dr. Lawrence. Sarah said. No, thank you. The parasitologist retorted. It's an Ermenegildo cashmere coat. I'm afraid the coat rack just would damage it. Oh, well, I have some wooden hangers if you would like me to hang it in the hallway closet instead. Sarah replied. That would do. Jack remarked, handing Sarah his coat. He walked into the living room and placed his box of macaroons on the table before straightening his bow tie. Oh, dearie. Could you take my coat too while you're at it? Moira asked, removing her coat to reveal a black dress embellished with pearls. Her short gray, professionally coiffed hair framed a pair of large emerald earrings. She threw her pea coat into Sarah's arms. Of course, Dr. Simmons. Sarah said, accepting the coat and heading toward the hallway closet. Moira. Darling. Jack interjected, planting a kiss on each of Moira's cheeks. Oh, Jack. Always playing a ham for the department head, I see. Moira smiled, relishing the attention from the younger man. Hi, Sarah. Is there anything I can help with? Squeaked a tall, slender blonde in her early 20s. Sure, Claire. Could you put your brownies and Dr. Simmons' cookies on the table in the living room? That would be a huge help. Okay. The young intern smiled, collecting the baked goods and going to the living room. So, Sarah, how did the disease response efforts go in Bangladesh? You got back a week ago, right? John asked, sipping a glass of high-end whiskey that Sarah had hidden away for special occasions in the back of the bar cupboard. Yes, I got back the day before yesterday. Things went well, I think, and are mostly under control. Sarah replied. Glad to hear everything is under control and all cleaned up. Jack interrupted. And thank you, Sarah, for volunteering to be part of the response efforts, even in the middle of moving to a new house. Moira commented. Sarah winced and looked down. Her boss gave her a hefty pat between her shoulder blades, making her stand up straight. Yep, we always need those boots on the ground. John exclaimed proudly and smiled. Isn't that right, Sarah? Yeah. Sarah whispered with her best smile. John volunteered her for every deployment, since Sarah had no spouse or children. The most recent deployment to Bangladesh fell on Thanksgiving, again. For the past 3 years, Sarah had been deployed for every holiday, and spent an average of 6 months a year on disease response efforts around the world as a field epidemiologist. She felt tired all the time and missed her family. That is certainly true. Moira quipped over her glass of wine. Hey John, why did you bring an apple pie to a cookie exchange? Jack asked, standing over the table of desserts. Oh, I didn't realize it was a cookie exchange. I thought it was just a Christmas party. John replied. Dr. Lawrence snickered. The invitation had clearly stated the event was a cookie exchange party. I hope you don't mind, Sarah. I brought some plates and silverware from the kitchen for the pie. Claire interrupted. Thank you, Claire. That's perfect. Sarah replied, thankful for the interruption. She watched the intern hand everyone a plate with a brownie and a piece of apple pie. Well, we can start divvying up the sweets for everyone to take home. Sarah suggested. Claire and Sarah headed to the kitchen to divide up the sweets. Claire, Sarah said. Did you want to take any of your brownies home? There's extra left. No. No, thank you. Claire replied hastily. I think I have more than enough sweets at the moment. Thank you. And besides, I can always make more. Thank you so much for suggesting I have this party. Sarah continued. It's been really hard for me to connect with people here. Do you think inviting my boss will work? Do you think he'll let me take Christmas off this year? And thank you so much for suggesting other people to invite from work. I've worked there for years, but I don't know anyone outside the division. Of course, you have to butter up to the boss once in a while. Claire smiled. And inviting other people from work, especially his boss, Moira, will help your cause. Other co-workers will make it less obvious that you're trying to suck up to the boss to get something and makes it more likely that he'll actually attend and listen to what you want. Sarah admired Claire. Her youthful enthusiasm and exuberant personality made her magnetic to the introverted scientists with whom she worked. Claire was extroverted, fashionable, and energetic, but perhaps a bit young and naive. She tended to be overly friendly with everyone. How are things in the research labs with Dr. Lawrence? Sarah asked. Claire's internship consisted of shadowing people in various departments throughout the organization. Oh. Things are going okay. Claire mumbled. What's that? Sarah asked. Oh. Things are going okay. I may be transferring to the epidemiology department soon though as the next step of my internship. That would be great. Sarah's enthusiastic response surprised the intern, making her take a step back. A polite smile graced Claire's face. Well, I'm off. Emily popped her head into the kitchen. She donned Sarah's spare hat and coat. Arrive late and leave early as I always say. Here you go, Emily. Claire held out a container of cookies and brownies. Brownie for the road? Don't mind if I do. Emily replied, grabbing a brownie from the tray that Claire held out. She smudged some chocolate icing on her nose as she crammed the dessert into her mouth. Have a safe trip home, Emily. Sarah smiled and waved. The evening continued a little longer. Friendly chatting and a brief game of charades ensued before everyone headed home with their containers of treats. On Monday, John granted Sarah permission to take a few weeks of leave to go see her family over Christmas, and Sarah was overjoyed. On Friday during her morning coffee break, Sarah noticed a jar in the break room bearing a smiling picture of Emily and a slip of paper taped on that read, Hospital Collection Fund for Emily Sacker. A company-wide email was released that morning notifying everyone that the department head, Dr. Moira Simmons, would be on extended medical leave. Good morning, Claire. Sarah greeted the intern in the hallway. Good morning, Sarah. Claire smiled. How have you been? Oh, okay. Really tired today though. I think the travel is catching up with me, but thanks to you I get Christmas off. Congratulations. Claire replied flatly. A bright smile lit her face. That's wonderful. Hey, did you see that email? Sarah continued. Looks like Emily is in the hospital, and Dr. Simmons is really sick too. Some sort of a really nasty stomach flu from what I've heard. Hope you and I didn't get exposed at the party. Oh, I doubt it. Claire replied with a laugh. Well, see you later. She waved to Sarah and headed off down the hall. In the afternoon, John left a note on Sarah's desk asking for a brief meeting. Sarah's boss often asked for such meetings when he wanted her to cover for him in his absence. Excuse me, sir. You called for me? Sarah knocked briefly before walking into her boss' office. Yes. Come in, Sarah. John's voice sounded tired and strained. She noticed that he looked unusually pale, and his left hand seemed to be having tremors. Sir, are you feeling okay? John would not or could not look directly at Sarah. He seemed distant. Distracted. Yes. I'm okay. He huffed in a panicky tone. Wait. No. I'm blind in one eye. The word stumbled from his mouth as he held his head in his hands. Sweat beaded on his brow. What? Momentary panic sent Sarah's heart and mind into overdrive. My eye. Can't see. Charlotte. I don't know. Sarah pulled out her cell phone and dialed 911. Charlotte was his wife's name. Sarah realized her boss was confused and disoriented. Something was definitely wrong. At that moment, John doubled over and vomited on his desk before collapsing unconscious on the floor. After a painstaking eternity, the ambulance arrived and took John to the hospital. He was alive, but critically ill. Thankfully, Sarah only had a few hours left in her workday. She went home late that afternoon feeling tired and nauseous. Thoughts ran through her mind. Everyone at the party a week ago had become critically ill. Emily, John, and Moira were all in the hospital in comas or feverish with delirium. The hospital doctors could not figure out what was causing the symptoms. Had she brought home some new disease from Bangladesh and spread it to everyone? But she had been working on an outbreak of STDs and wasn't exposed to anything similar to the symptoms she was seeing in her coworkers now. Was she going to get sick? Was she getting sick? Claire seemed to be doing well this morning and wasn't sick. What disease agent could cause the symptoms? Blindness, neurologic deficits, nausea, confusion, fever, muscle twitching, coma. Could be any number of diseases, but nothing she encountered in Bangladesh. Airborne would have spread to other people in the office, but no one else was affected. Foodborne. It had to be from something everyone ate at the party last weekend. But what? It had to be a foodborne disease, but not E. coli or salmonella. The doctors at the hospital would have recognized those diseases, and the presentation of symptoms just didn't fit. As the evening wore on, Sarah noticed that she felt increasingly fatigued and dizzy. Then a thought struck her. Years ago, as a veterinarian, Sarah had been helping a wildlife rehabber with some raccoons she was fostering. The wildlife rehabber became ill with neurologic symptoms and blindness after being infected with a type of roundworm found in raccoons. No one at the party had been around raccoons that Sarah knew of. But raccoon intestinal parasites? How? Parasites? Parasitology. There were 2 parasitologists at the party. Sarah began feeling worse. She had to go to the hospital. Ding dong. Sarah jumped up with a start, but her dizziness caused her to fall off the couch onto the floor. Who would be at the door at 11 p.m.? She staggered over and opened the door. Claire. What are you doing here? Sarah's feverish mind slurred her words. I was worried you might be sick, so I came to check up on you. Claire greeted Sarah. My boss, Dr. Lawrence, also came down sick, and I just found out in an email that he died tonight. Oh no, Claire. Come in. Come in. I'm sorry. I'm not feeling well. Sarah staggered and Claire caught her arm. The intern led Sarah to the couch to let her sit down. Can I get you any water? Claire asked. No. I'm okay, Claire, but do you know if Dr. Lawrence was doing any work in his lab on Balasascaris roundworms? I think we all got exposed somehow. Sarah mumbled. Oh. No. Not that I know of. Claire replied. Sarah thought that the look on Claire's face seemed odd. She looked expectant or annoyed. I need to go to my car. Claire suddenly proclaimed. You need an ambulance, but I forgot my phone in the car. I'll be right back. Claire headed outside, leaving Sarah on the couch. Fever clouded Sarah's mind, but a thought caused her heart to jolt in her chest. She struggled to gather her thoughts. Sarah stood up and staggered toward the door, but Claire reappeared in the doorway. What did you do? Sarah demanded, shock and horror overtaking her. I'm sorry. Claire's voice echoed throughout the house. You did something to the food. Sarah stammered. Claire's shoulders stiffened. I'm sorry, Sarah. Claire spoke with an icy tone. You were nice enough, but you were never really kind to me. You only needed to say just one kind word or encouragement. I gave to you and helped you, but mostly you ignored me, especially when I needed help the most. As a result, you became collateral damage that's lasted longer than I planned. What? Sarah stammered on shaky legs. The room swirled and swayed. I asked you once how you dealt with all the men you worked with. I asked if you've ever had to deal with sexual harassment and how you did it. Your reply was that you just got used to it. That it would happen anywhere anyway, and there was no reason to focus on it. Just let it go, you said. Sarah's brows furrowed. She did not remember the conversation or her comments, and she did not understand how such a conversation would have caused Claire to intentionally infect her coworkers with a fatal dose of raccoon roundworms. I needed someone. Claire continued, her voice cracking. I needed someone to talk to after what he did to me. He. Sarah doubled over in pain. Claire came closer. Her shoes clacked on the wood floor. Lawrence. Jack Lawrence. Claire emphasized the Z at the end. Her voice seethed with venom. What he did to me. Who cares if he's a world-renowned parasitologist? Of course, it should be an honor for me to work with him. I should be able to put up with his tendencies. It's the chance of a lifetime to learn from him. Claire now stood within arm's reach of Sarah. Sarah kneeled on the floor in pain. Every muscle in her body twitched and ached. She could see the hand axe Claire hid behind her leg. It was so easy to do it working in a parasitology lab. Catch a raccoon in a live trap. Harvest parasite eggs from its shit. Filter them out to create a super concentrated solution that could be added to the icing on some brownies brought to a holiday cookie exchange. Make sure he and everyone else ate the brownies before leaving the party. How much they ate wouldn't matter. I made sure there would be enough eggs in each bite to be lethal. Everyone had to eat some to divert suspicion, you know. Claire stood over Sarah now. I am truly sorry, Sarah. Claire said, raising the axe above her head. Nothing personal. The axe whooshed down, creating a loud thwack. Doug began speaking and the group instantly fell silent, as they bounced along inside the nondescript panel van. Synchronize watches to 23:45 hours on my mark. They all clicked their watches, except Gadget. With nothing to click, she looked to Flo. Don't worry, you'll be with me. Flo smiled, and Gadget saw kindness in her brown eyes. We'll start the 20-minute countdown on my second mark, at 00 hours, confirmed Doug. Gadget looked to Flo again expectantly, and this time Flo sighed. That's when our inside man will turn off the security system. We'll have 20 minutes before they reset it. Flo's face showed the signs of frustration worn by an adult indulging the curiosity of a child. Didn't they tell you anything about the mission? They said not to worry because I'd be with you. Flo raised a single eyebrow then laughed heartily. Gadget would have laughed too if she wasn't petrified about what she had agreed to do. While the others checked their equipment, all Gadget could focus on was that she was 15 minutes away from being a criminal. That first broken law would be the first of many tonight. Flo was concerned about the fear she could see across Gadget's face. Gadget was key to the success of their mission, and they had to succeed. Are we terrorists? Asked Gadget. What? Said Flo, who now realized she'd been staring. I mean, if we get caught, it'll be bad, right? We won't get caught. Gadget looked unconvinced. Flo leaned forward so she could speak more softly to reassure her. They'd only get one chance. After tonight their inside man would definitely be sacked by the Hindsight Corporation, HC. And they had to succeed. You're a hacker, continued Flo, armed robbery is a step down for you. Gadget smiled at what she thought was a joke. The world punishes whistleblowers more than robbers, secrets are more valuable than cash. But we are stealing secrets. I'll let the courts decide on the details. Before Gadget could come back with her long list of further concerns, the van came to a stop. There was no backing out now. Doug opened the side door and jumped out the van. Peter and Paul followed, then Flo nodded to Gadget, and she followed the others. Gadget was 5 foot tall with short cut hair, and as she jumped out the van Flo thought she looked more like a child running away from home, than a terrorist. Flo was the last to jump out, and closed the door behind her, leaving Keith in the driver's seat poised for a speedy getaway when they were done. The group ran through the long grass and were soon at the rendezvous point, the boundary fence of the HC compound. Dressed all in black, they looked the part if nothing else. Only Flo didn't wear a rucksack as she had a cattle prod strapped to her back, along with the pistol holstered to her hip. Gadget was the only one unarmed. They crouched down by the fence, and there was no one else in sight. A low hum of distant voices could be heard coming from the opposite side of the compound, but the side they were going to breach was as silent as a graveyard. Peter pulled the cutting torch from his rucksack and waited. Doug looked at his watch. Begin your 20-minute countdown in 3, 2, 1, mark. Start cutting. As the cutting began, there was no ringing klaxon, so they knew their inside man had done their job. Despite the torch's built-in darkened screen to protect Peter's eyes, the reflected light on the metal fence was enough to make everyone squint. But the security cameras were blind to the beacon brightening the dark night. "Stop!" shouted Doug. He had instantly recognized a noise that the rest of the group hadn't heard. "Get out the blankets." Paul quickly opened his rucksack and pulled out several thermal blankets for them to hide under. Flo could hear the sound of a drone approaching. Unperturbed, Peter silently reached into his rucksack, retrieved his bolt cutters, and continued working on the fence. "It must be on a different network to the rest of the security systems," stated Doug. Without hesitation he was adapting to the setback. "Paul, take a blanket and run back to the van. Radio the protesters and tell them to up the ante, and hopefully that will be enough to draw away the drone. But come back with the EMP rifle just in case." "On it." Without further word Paul was gone, and they huddled tighter under the remaining blankets, while Peter continued working. Gadget's mind raced, and she recognized that Doug's actions were the product of training you didn't get at the Boy Scouts. At that moment she realized she knew nothing about the people she had entrusted her freedom to, and her life. With the regular snap of the bolt cutters ticking down their clock, they waited. They could hear the muffled whine of the drone's motors overhead. Under the blankets they were in complete darkness, and Peter worked by touch alone. With every tick of the bolt cutters, Gadget knew her chances of getting caught increased. Then without warning, the sound of the drone's motors overhead altered their tone. It was changing direction. Doug made a narrow gap in the blankets to confirm. "Looks like our protesters got Paul's message. 30 more seconds and I'll be through." "Okay, we move on your go." Then Doug placed his hand on Gadget's shoulder. "When I move, you follow tight behind me." Doug drew his pistol in readiness. "Okay," confirmed Gadget. She told herself that it was the cold that had made her teeth chatter when she opened her mouth. With his last snap, Peter dropped the bolt cutters. He stood to hold open the L he'd cut into the fence, so the others could pass through. Now. Without hesitation Doug moved on Peter's signal, and Gadget followed closely behind. With Paul still not back with his empty rucksack, Flo bundled up the blankets, and covered over the bolt cutters and torch. There wasn't time to conceal them more thoroughly. Flo then followed the first two, and Peter brought up the rear with his gun drawn. Once they were all at the next rendezvous point, Doug checked the door was unlocked as planned. "We didn't anticipate drones," explained Doug, talking directly to Flo, "so we'll wait inside the door for you instead." Flo nodded, but as she turned to go through the door Doug placed his hand on her shoulder, and spoke again at a volume only Flo could hear. Flo replied at the same volume, but Gadget could lip read. Compared to hacking, lip reading was often an easier way to get people's personal information. "If I wanted one, I'd have one," she mouthed. Then turning to Gadget, who was already watching her, Flo said, "Just keep up." Flo drew her pistol, centered the cattle prod more comfortably on her back, then opened the door and rushed through. Gadget followed next, then Peter, then finally Doug, who closed the door behind them. For a powerful woman, Flo moved with grace, and her footsteps were silent. Gadget followed closely behind, pulling the straps of her rucksack so it was tight against her back, to lessen the rattle of her gear inside. Gadget looked behind her, and the other two had already disappeared into hiding places she hadn't spotted. Flo had been inside the HC compound many times, and run through the maze of corridors with purpose. As they approached a left turn in the maze, Flo stopped, and reached back her free hand to press Gadget close against the side wall. "Flo. Shoo. What did Doug say to you?" It had played on Gadget's mind the whole time they ran through the maze, and unanswered questions ate away at her. Flo poked her head around the corner, and saw there was no one down the next corridor, which was larger than the previous ones. Asked if I wanted a gun, then anticipating the next question she added, "One with bullets rather than darts." Then Flo turned the corner and run to an unmarked door, with Gadget in tow. "Wait here." Gadget silently nodded. Flo entered through the door with her gun tight to her body, and pointing forward. Seconds later an arm reached through the doorframe, and dragged Gadget inside. They were in the data room. This part of the mission Gadget knew well. She quickly identified the storage unit HC used to back up their data, and ran over to it. Now range wasn't an issue. Flo holstered her pistol, and took the cattle prod off her back. She stood guard at the windowless door ready to act. Gadget already had her electric screwdriver working away at the side panel of the storage unit. "So why are you doing this?" asked Gadget. "Shoo. Come on. I can't work in silence, it creeps me out." Then stopping her work, Gadget looked back to Flo hovering by the door. "They wouldn't let me play my music through headphones, so unless you want to sing to me. It's a long story. Tell me the short version, we must have at least 10 minutes left of our 20. Gadget had the panel off, and placed her hand on the wall to ground herself, so any built-up static in her didn't short out the components. 8 minutes and 40 seconds actually. But the answer is payback. The Hindsight Corporation ruined my life before I was even born. Gadget looked into the storage unit and didn't like what she saw. The memory banks weren't like anything she'd seen before. She didn't expect to be lucky enough to have a convenient USB port for a quick download, but she couldn't even tell where one would have been put. She turned back to Flo while she thought what to do. "I didn't mean that short, meet me in the middle. Just get on with it. Then talk to me." But Flo was right, her words made Gadget realize she needed to keep removing panels, so she could get a full view of the components inside. Eventually something would look familiar. Okay, said Flo. She walked into the center of the room so she could speak softer. "My father paid to be projected into the future before I was born. He was told his firstborn would be a girl called Florence, and a jiu-jitsu champion. When he was told he was going to have a daughter, he named her Florence and was convinced everything he'd learned during his projection was true. But that was a 50-50 chance, and calling you Florence isn't even probability." "You don't have to tell me," said Flo. Her reluctance to say more confirmed to Gadget there was more to tell. With the second panel on the floor next to the first, Gadget was no closer to solving the puzzle. She was stuck. So they conned him. Yeah, 5 projections worth, but it wasn't that. Flo paused to listen at the door, but there was nothing to hear. "HC stole my childhood. All I did was train all the time, and I hated it, it wasn't a future I believed in. So the projections were wrong? I don't know." Gadget stopped and turned back. She didn't have a clue what she was doing anyway, she was just too stubborn to admit it. Her look told Flo she didn't understand what she had said either. "I'll never know. I withdrew from the national final, which would have taken me to the Worlds if I'd won. Gadget just listened. They took my childhood and my father from me with their. He never forgave me. Maybe with time. We'll never know." Gadget knew what that meant, and apologized with her eyes. "I don't know how to do this," confessed Gadget. The confession snapped Flo back to the moment, and she pushed back her memories again. She walked over to Gadget, and placed the cattle prod down on the table, so she could help. Flo looked over Gadget's shoulder into the maze of wires and blinking lights. She reached her hand into the storage unit, and Gadget struck like a viper, slapping her hand away. "Stop. Your static could fry the components." Flo glared back at her, but Gadget held firm. "I was going to say," said Flo, "they only screwed in." "Yeah. So put in a doggy bag, and we'll take it with us." Gadget realized Flo was right, she'd been looking at it like a software problem, when it was a hardware problem. "Get to it, Gadget, we've got 6 minutes, so you've got 2. Now she had an answer, Gadget's hands were a blur. Soon there were piles of screws at her feet, and several components already in her rucksack, but there were a lot of memory banks within the storage unit. Flo stood guard at the door again, watching over Gadget. The whine of her screwdriver was constant. It wasn't loud, but Flo still didn't hear the approaching footsteps. "Halfway there," said Gadget. Flo was about to reply when she heard the door handle slowly creak. Her cattle prod was still on the table out of reach. Rather than grab the weapon, she backed toward the wall, to hide behind the door that was now opening. The guard silently stepped into the room. Consumed by her task, Gadget was oblivious to the threat creeping up on her. The guard drew his gun without saying a word, and started to take aim. He hadn't checked behind the door. Flo pounced on him, wrapping her right arm around his neck, and placing her left behind his head. She spun him so his gun was pointing to the side as she tightened the choke, and he was already losing consciousness before his gun hit the floor. Gadget turned to the sound of the clattering gun, just in time to see Flo drop the limp body. "Time's up." Gadget feared the look in Flo's eyes and didn't question her command. She wiped her prints from the gear she had to leave behind to make space for the memory banks in her rucksack, and watched Flo. Flo pulled out a knife that was sheathed across her lower back, and cut a long length of wire, which was clipped to the wall. Gadget had exposed the trellis frame of the storage unit, and Flo looped the wire through it. She'd created a makeshift sling to put her arms through. Bending at her knees, she lifted the storage unit from the bottom, and balanced it against her back. Gadget was amazed at her strength. "You'll have to protect us. I'll direct you from behind." Gadget was scared, but what choice did they have? There was no way she could carry it. She reached down to pick up the gun on the floor. "No," shouted Flo, "the cattle prod, it'll be safer for all of us." Gadget smiled with relief. "We'll move as fast as you can run, so we'll have the element of surprise. If it moves, just zap it." As they sped down the corridors, Flo easily kept up with Gadget's pace. Only her pants between commands revealed the burden she carried. Flo gave her command at every approaching junction, and Gadget showed no signs of hesitation. Gadget didn't even hesitate when they turned right into an unsuspecting guard. When the two bodies in black were bearing down on him, he only had time to open his mouth in shock, before Gadget jabbed the cattle prod under his chin, and fired. His body convulsed, and despite her size, Gadget's momentum knocked him to the floor, and they continued past. Flo was so surprised at her ruthlessness, she nearly forgot to give her command as they approached the next junction. Left. The exit was dead ahead, and they must have only had seconds left before the security system was back up. As they approached the door, the three men waiting for them stepped out from their hiding places. They each knew their tasks, and acted without a command from Doug. Paul went through the door with his EMP rifle aimed high, and Peter took off his rucksack to swap with Flo for the run to the van. "You were meant to steal the data, not the furniture," said Doug. Flo was too tired to speak. "I don't know if there's space in the van for this." With her newfound confidence, Gadget answered for Flo. "If you want to volunteer to stay behind, that'll fix the problem." Doug was too shocked to reply. This wasn't the girl he'd led through the fence 20 minutes ago. Before he could find any words to say, he was spared by Paul opening the door again. "It's clear, let's move." As Peter lifted the storage unit onto his back with a grunt, it wasn't only Gadget that gave Flo a feeling of pride. They ran as fast as their legs could carry them, and were soon in the van without further incident. Keith drove away at full speed with his headlights off, and night vision goggles on. They had all fitted inside the van, the storage unit was on the floor in the middle, and they sat around it like a campfire. "You did well in there," said Flo, "you never did say why. Doing this? The people have a right to know the truth. Dr. Chase's claims are already tearing the world apart, and I want to know what they saw in that projection." As they continued to bounce down the back roads, Gadget looked down into their campfire. "I just hope that's shock resistance." "Keith," Flo called out, "slow down will ya, we're clear." Centuries ago a secret society, bent on the idea of a world inhabited only by them and those of their choosing, quietly formed and began to lay the foundations that their chosen predecessors would build upon for generations to come. Eventually they proclaimed themselves the elite intelligence leaders of Earth's reform, or Islers. Only the very highest of society's high class and those viewed to be absolute genius within the proper academic fields were deemed worthy of recruitment consideration. Those candidates were thinned further using stricter scrutinies until only those found perfect were clear to be approached. With members dedicating their entire lives to their sacred cause, the Islers swiftly and silently put into place everything ruled necessary to create the world they so feverishly sought. For decades enormous laboratories, safe houses, storage facilities, and highways connecting them were installed deep beneath Earth's surface in preparation of the day their dreams could be realized. Years before humanity could develop infantile suspicions, Islers had developed things far beyond their capacity to fathom. Genetically engineered beasts known as woolgarriers, falderies, warbarrelin, crocozerfin, all programmed to obey the Islers. Any human wanted for entertainment or servitude purposes would be lab-produced, pre-programmed specimens of chosen design. The different countries, states, providences, even the plant itself would cease to exist by their former names, as with only one controlling factor any needs for such divisions were rendered extinct. This new playground for the true deserving rule would be known only as Euphrasia, the perfect combination of Isler humor and truth, as this utopia would come about through their unique form of euthanasia for euphoric gains. Many would like to believe this only science fiction, perhaps at worst the ramblings of some conspiracy theorist whose mind has finally completely broke. For remainders, the last surviving non-LRS, however, Euphrasia has been their new reality for the greater part of 8 years now and, despite its spelling, they all understand it's pronounced hell. Ragtag groups of remainders had banded together in mostly small numbers since the Islers launched their first wave. Many were hunted down and killed by the various beasts that now prowled on land, in the sky, and by waterways alike. Others starved or succumbed to the elements, diseases, or effects of nuclear and chemical fallout. Some couldn't be defined as surviving, their minds had snapped, leaving them barely more than wild beasts themselves. Others just disappeared into what wilderness was left, content with existing however long they may have, so long as they lived and died on their own terms. Sure, some fought back, but to no avail. Most fought and squabbled amongst each other, handling the Islers' work for them. A very rare few had proved themselves quite the intolerable nuisance, as had been the case for Alina's band of misfits. Had been was, of course, the key phrase of that statement. Alina came back to semi-consciousness in panic and an agony like she'd never known, trying in spite of it to bolt upright and intensifying the terror as she realized she was immobilized. Hot tears sprang to her eyes, but with effort she blinked them away and staved off the flow. They could take her life, but not with the satisfaction of breaking her first. Physical pain is only temporary no matter how bad, she told herself, the phrase fast becoming an inner mantra even as the fog settled back in, fading her out. Alina, Elianana. Alina. That final snapping of her name, sharp as a slap, brought her to the surface enough to at least cut her eyes in the direction of its origin. Ah, yes, atta girl. Unfortunately, instead of just putting you down like the repulsive vermin you are, I need you alive and conscious for at least a bit longer. Alina dear, don't do that, focus. Someone was talking and snapping fingers in her face, and again she fought to understand. Fine, I'll give you the anti-venom, though I'd much rather you suffer through. Pay attention, damn it, you'll be coming out of it rather fast once this traverses your veins a time or two. A pinch, then a feeling like being forcefully yanked from watery depths. Alina gasped and nearly wretched. Don't you dare. A man, thin and balding, thick glasses, stood over her with such an extreme hatred in his eyes he could be no other than an Isler. Fear gripped her heart again, and this time, as the agony faded away, she knew she should have fought to stay inside the fog instead. This was it, the end. He knew it and knew it wasn't going to come easy. His could only hope the others had gotten away safely somehow. He was long overdue on the other side of life. He was good with dying, but getting one of them killed. Unacceptable. They should have been 10 times more cautious. Years of successful raids on Isler buildings had made them stupidly confident and bought them their send-off this time. Hagen mentally checked his body for injuries, rating severity, while attempting to appear still lost in unconsciousness. Nothing noteworthy internally, he focused on what his senses, with the exception of sight, could tell him about his external surroundings. Luck somehow made it to the rendezvous point before collapsing to his knees, then over onto his side. Gone, they were gone, the only family he'd known for the last 5 horrendous years, now just names on an already too long list. His mind replayed that last heart-wrenching sight before he'd finally forced himself to follow logic and run. Alina leaping from the roof, attempting retreat, nearly making it but being brutally seized in the air by a falderie, its lethal, venom-soaked talons piecing deep into her back. Her scream before the beast disappeared back inside the compound with her would haunt him forever. He knew the risk he was taking every second past the set limit of 10 minutes, but leaving was like confirming them dead. Chrissy sat shivering, her back pressed against the damp earth of the pit she dropped into. The ground had just opened up beneath her, swallowing her whole and closing behind her. The darkness so complete she may as well have squeezed her eyes shut. As absolute as it was, it didn't feel empty, and when the stench of rotting meat hit her nostrils followed by a warm, sickeningly wet tongue lapping slowly up one side of her face as if savoring the taste of her fear, Chrissy began to scream. Raynor came to with blood running into his eyes, the stinging causing him to grab a fistful of his shirt and use it to rub at his face forcefully. The night around him was deathly still, but as he started to raise up, a strong arm snaked around his throat, dragging him backward. What do you want from me? Alina found her voice as her captor dug through a desk compartment for who knew what. Oh, not much really, just keep breathing for now, and when the time comes do really well with your part as the pitiful, helpless female so I can extract the information I need from your mate. From my... She internalized the rest of her sentence. Mate? What mate? Did he mean one of the men in her crew? Had someone else survived? You're wasting your time and mine. He casually stood and walked calmly to the table she was strapped on, looking down at her with an eerie smile before exploding into violent action and driving an old letter opener straight to the bone inches above her right knee. Calm again, he watched her strain involuntarily against the straps, her high-pitched scream fading into the keening of a wounded, terrified animal. I don't believe I am, no. No, I think something of that sort will be just the ticket. He smiled again, flicked the opener's protruding end and danced away as if enjoying some grand tune. Checking the masterpiece they dared still title a watch, Harrington smiled again. What an exciting night, and oh, how he loved excitement. Now that the filthy little rodent was squirming in pain again, he had other business that should be delivered within the minute. Leaving the interrogation chamber and swiftly entering his temporary living quarters, he was not displeased with the timing of a thump at his door. Rolf, his personal woolgarier, sat patiently with his part of this mission balled up and shaking between his massive front paws. Very well, bring her in and place her on the cot. Carefully as a mother lion might her cub, the grizzly-sized wolf, cougar, bear hybrid lifted its living package and padded into the room doing exactly as he was told. As they always did. Very good, too long indeed, Thank you Rolf, see yourself to the male's holding area and await further instructions. He absent-mindedly waved the beast off. Welcome home daughter. He strived to hit the perfect tone of disappointed, stern, yet relieved parent. Let's hope the cleansing it's gonna take to rid the last 7 years you've insisted on living as normal filth doesn't actually kill you before we can reunite as a proper family. Gently as possible he tightened the restraints on her wrists, ankles, and midsection. He'd let her rest as he worked on the disgusting bile that had somehow poisoned her mind and taken her from him long ago. Having heard the muffled but still blood-curdling scream, Hagen had to rethink the good of his previous prayers. He knew death could indeed be a great mercy. He didn't get long to chew on it as a woolgarier entered, plucked him from his gurney as though he was a mere infant and trotted out into a corridor of sorts. Humiliating to say the least, dangling from the beast's mouth like a chew toy. He caught glimpse of a man, unmistakably an idler, seconds before a hood slipped over his head and the trotting started again. He was soon roughly discarded onto a hard surface, pulled upright into a sitting position, and the hood was yanked free. A whip-thin man in at least his early 50s stood towering over him, his expression inquisitive with a fist pressed to his lips, forehead furrowed above beady squinting eyes. Not even acceptable breeding stock, well, not the purpose anyhow, nothing lost. Come now look at me, really look so I know you're fully aware. Fuck you, how's that for breeding stock you evil piece of shit? Not much intelligence either, speech is understandable though and that's all I need. Listen carefully, I only say this once without consequence. I need to know how many little friends you brought with you and where to find the ones that may have managed to survive. Slowed reaction time due to just regaining consciousness saved Blades from being flung across his shoulder and ending up with a broken neck. Shush it tough guy, I didn't drag myself and your sorry ass out of that clusterfuck just to die from your lack of control. Fuck you, Blades. He managed to sputter out. You got a long way to go before that's a possibility Romeo, pull yourself together. How bad, everyone? Shush, listen. It's bad, worst we've ever got. Jeremy and Feist are dead, Chrissy and Lux are unaccounted, but it's difficult to believe in a happy reunite at a rendezvous. Alina, hag. She paused but then. Taken. Causing him to strain to get up, forcing her to muscle him around more. No. Don't be stupid. We try to go in that only ends with all 4 dead and you know they may already be gone, breathing or not. We wait, we watch, long as we can. If we can we will do everything possible, if we cannot we do not dishonor them by dying stupid. She was right, he hated it but he'd preached those very concepts to them repeatedly for years, he and Hagen had. Alina squealed and thrashed about despite her every attempt not to as the bastard viciously twisted the object deeply embedded in her thigh. Hagen spewed a stream of obscenities and promises of brutal death and she desperately sucked in deep, unsteady breaths trying to prepare for the next assault. That does not pertain to a single question I asked you, I'm very disappointed in you. He disappeared behind his desk causing Alina to start shaking. Hagen, keep your mouth shut, it don't matter. She still managed through clenched teeth. He'd known pain and suffering, seemingly unbearable agony, but this was indescribable. Hagen. Don't you fucking dare. The Eiler son of a bitch cut her off mid-sentence by grabbing her by her chin and pinching tightly. It's a shame I need you making all those pretty screams, else and I'd sew that filthy mouth shut. Releasing her with a shove, he turned back to Hagen. Now that I have your undivided attention. He held an inconspicuous little silver instrument in front of him for Hagen to see but hidden from Alina's view. Do you know what this is? What it's used for? Hagen's chest and throat began to tighten and burn as he worked desperately to keep down the churning stomach acid. No. Ah, well then, allow me to educate you. He towered over him again but leaned down till they were almost nose to nose. Big mistake, asshole. Hagen had to suppress a grin, but then. Rolf, should this pathetically stupid remainder do anything to prove that nature, the girl automatically becomes your dinner and you are to take your time, really savor your meal. You son of bitch, you sorry motherfucker, You'll shut up and listen to me only speaking when asked to, or I'll cut my losses and he can have her now. As if to get in its rathers, the Woolgarir whined and chuffed from its place by the door. Now, back to our lesson. This pretty little instrument here is simple, yes, but a must for any data extraction kit. You see, you take this end like such, placing this part underneath the fingernail just so, and press until you feel the resistance of the nail bed. Now, here's where technique is applied. Some prefer to just cram it in and pop the nail loose all in one quick go. Myself, I say what a waste, no creativity. This is an art. I like to slowly work it back and forth, never really letting up pressure but not rushing the process either, and my way you can get all the way to the base and pry loose the entire nail. None of that sloppy business. Hagen trembled, his eyes closed tight enough to cause starbursts, his jaws ached from clenching his teeth, and his fingertips threatened to bite into his palms. Please. I'm sorry, what was that? Please. Please don't. What? Use this? On her? I most certainly will without your intervention. I'm not the bad guy here really, you could stop it. You could end every bit of this, I just need a number and relative location. Pretty fair trade, I believe. He stood back up straight and began backing toward Alina, twirling the damn thing between finger and thumb. Going once, going twice, and I'll count the silence as your choice. Negotiations are closed for this round, folks. Turning, he latched onto one of Alina's fingers as she fought hard to get away. The more you squirm, the longer this takes. Your choice. Showing obvious surprise in his voice, he couldn't help but cruelly tease her as she stopped struggling. Now see, they're a good dumb see. Now his eyes registered a very different surprise and he tried to straighten himself to full height, mouth gaping. Harrington Matthews Fellerock 3 fell dead without ever finishing that sentence. Alina's eyes widened with fear as she remembered the Woolgarir. Hagen already had his attention glued to the beast that still sat by the door calmly as though nothing had become of his owner. Chrissy went straight to quickly loosening Alina's restraints until she was satisfied Alina could finish the task. Silently she stepped over her father and began loosening those on Hagen. Alina and Hagen remained tense but stunned into a continued silence. Chrissy finally broke. I'd say search quickly, but I'm not sure that would be smart. I've already gathered some supplies while I searched for a weapon and your whereabouts. They're waiting outside the door. Can both of you manage walking out of here or? She grinned devilishly, looking from one to the other for dramatic effect before walking over to the Woolgarir still sitting as calm and innocent as an oblivious puppy. Neither could hold back gasps of alarm as she put her face to its and spoke something inaudible to them. The confusion only intensified as the Woolgarir stood up, nudged her chin almost in a loving-like gesture and patted out the door where it stopped and glanced back as if to say, you guys coming or what? Well. Walking or riding? Walking. They declared in unison. Chrissy, Hagen started but she hushed him with a stop gesture. Earning everyone's trust was harder for me than anyone else in our group, why? Because you're. Quickly connecting the dots, his astonishment only increased. That piece of work was, at one time, my father. Yes. Not for a very long time now, and I feel nothing other than relief in saving you two and admittedly excitement for getting to reunite after all these years. You see, Rolf was never his, he was created and programmed for me when my father was still convinced I'd delight in being an Eiler. She smiled again brightly. So, how you think our next raid is gonna go, seeing as how we have our very own Woolgarir now?